Hi, everybody. Welcome to our 19th episode of Andy's Licorice Talk. We have a very special guest again for you, and Martin Fröst, who's with us. Before we introduce him, we want to remind you to please like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as I always advise, have your phone ready for messages, have your pencil and paper. I think every one of these interviews has been incredibly educational, and I expect this one to be very much so as well. So I always take notes afterwards, after I listen. So without further ado, we would like to introduce Martin Fröst. Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Great. Usually I just start with how I know the guest. I don't know Martin very well, but we were just reminiscing that he did play a recital a few years ago in Hong Kong with his brother, and we met briefly afterwards and chatted. And ironically, in 2012, I gave a masterclass at the academy where he teaches in Stockholm, but he wasn't there. So we'll talk a little bit about his teaching and everything else, but there's so much to talk about. So thank you so much for being with us. What a thrill! And let's just start with, what have you been doing during this COVID period personally?
Oh, good question. I was doing my last concert in London, and actually it was already in Europe then. So when I went home, I realized this was my last concert for a while. And yeah, well, I did quite many streamings after that. So streaming concert. I have my own orchestra in Sweden, Swedish Chamber Orchestra. So we did also a couple of projects that was already scheduled, but we just did them as streaming concerts, and with the Stockholm Philharmonic. But I mean, it was much more free time than I was used to have, of course. In the beginning, I actually just lost everything. So I didn't practice for a while, actually. And I was contemplation, and it was a time for contemplation and for thoughts and for being creative, I think, after a while, in many ways. And I think that's what I've been talking to people about. I think what I felt with orchestra when I met orchestras again, and everyone was kind of waiting for okay, it will be in a few weeks or in a few months, it will be like normal again. And I said, well, it's not going to be like normal. And I'm pretty sure still that it's not going to be normal again, which in one way could be a good thing. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and I was in China on tour with NDR in November. And in the same time when we were there, I think in Shanghai, and I saw that at least 4 other big orchestras was there in the same time, playing, Bruckner, Mahler, and the same repertoire as we did. Not I, because I was playing Mozart concerto. And then I thought, this will not happen in a long time again. Not only, the pandemic, the climate change. I think we have to rethink how we present classical music in general. And this crisis could mean something really good, I think. And I have a lot of philosophic thoughts about that, and also the way we should change. I think you should plan for the future right now.
Yeah, well, I always write my notes, and then we always go off on tangents. But this is actually where one area I wanted to go, and let me tell you why. You already have been doing things a little bit differently from the ordinary concerts as both a conductor, multimedia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're talking, my guess, without having talked to you, is that you've already been a little bit visionary about how maybe concerts will or should change. So I'd like to ask you about that. Before COVID, did you think that? But moreover, with COVID, do you think even more so it'll change in that direction, or that it will change in a different direction from what you envision? How would you put all these pieces of the puzzle together in terms of your vision of concerts for the future?
Yeah, a big question and a good question. I think that from the start, I was always interested in a broader sense. First, music generally, but also even broader. And I think in the same time I was maybe brave in one way, but very shy and careful in another way. For example, my recording, the way I recorded in the past, I sort of concentrate only on main repertoire. I try to do my really best and try to. Well, if you look at my recordings, the first 20 recordings, they are basically main repertoire. I did Mozart, Weber, Brahms, French repertoire, and everything. And of course, I had the feeling that I have to stand very, very grounded in the conservative and the how do you say, the conventional repertoire, to do the other thing that I had a lot of excitement to do this adventure thing. And so in one way, I think I could never done what I did without having so strong connection to the historical, the music history that we already had. So I was super concentrating on that the first 20 years. And then I have like one project every third year that I try to go on the wild side and try to change something. But I was always worried about what would people think. And so I was not so brave as I wanted to be. But when I looked at it now and I see myself 25 years old and doing the Hilbert Concerto with mask and with lights and dancing and everything, of course I tried to step out and out of the box and try to open some new doors to the future already there. But I think that's our world, you know. You have to do Weber, Mozart, and everything on the top level and try to do that recordings to be the best. That's what I tried all the time, and I was really focused on that. But then I have the excitement, and I had a play also later. That I was maybe 35, and I talked to people about it, that you should really look in the future back mirror and talk to yourself as that when you are 85 or 90, what would you be proud of that you did with your life? I'm talking about well, you can talk about your whole life, but now I'm talking about the musical life. So would you be proud of that you did, let's say, 700 Weber concertos and 1200 Mozart, or would you be proud that you did something that try to change direction for the world that we are living in? And I think the answer then can change your way of doing it right now. So you don't have to wait until you're 85 years old. You could change your way of doing things right now. And I got the idea because I'm sure it doesn't matter if you're Nelson Mandela or whoever you are, you could look back on your life and think, oh, I should have done more of that or less than that. And yeah, probably we will all say that we should have spent more time with our family, because I think that people say in the end of their lives.
Well, but now, how do you think concerts? Well, I mean, we know you're very involved in multimedia. You just mentioned dance. You talk sometimes. You philosophize on stage. You have lights. First of all, is this a direction that you're sort of combining all the arts in one direction, in one event? I find.
Mm. Yeah, I would say this is just the start. As I said, I've been so, maybe you see these things because they are different. But to be honest, I play still 90% normal concerts, and then suddenly I try to, well, I put quite a lot of work when I try to break the codes for what we call classical music, but it's very little part of my work. I could do more, but it's not that easy to change things. And I try my way, and I will be very happy if I manage to do some things to open doors, to open new doors where we can go in the future. And going back to your original question around the pandemic and everything, I think in crisis like this, or the climate crisis, or any crisis, we are forced to look at ourselves and look at the world that we are living in. In our world, in the musical world, we will be forced to do changes. And of course, I'm in that age that I feel like I still can be fresh in my mind to really feel that I would love to do some new things that could manage to do these things, to try not only combining things, because people always do that, but to present and to involve or to invite a new audience or new people, or the way we are communicating with an orchestra or anything that we can look more into, I think.
And specifically related to the pandemic, like you said, the Bruckner and this all going on, and you said, I don't think this is going to happen for a while. Where do you see things going?
Well, I think people will come up with different answer on that. And well, one idea, for example, is to, if you have the possibility, and if you're talking about new projects, for example, if you create a new project, why don't we spend a bit more time than we used to do with the symphony project? I mean, the usual stuff is that you fly in as a soloist, you come in and you rehearse for one day, and then you do the concerts or the tour or whatever, and then you go home. And then the next week, another soloist, another conductor. That's how we work. I mean, it's a very quick thing, and it doesn't get slower. If it's not something, it gets quicker. So one way to do it is to slow down that process, or to make it more, to get deeper in things. So if I said, a chance that I have is to do it with my orchestra. So if we go on tour, maybe we should not go only on, like we do next year, we go on a Mozart project. I play the concerto, I conduct the Prague Symphony, and we do a European tour. But we could also think about, why don't we rehearse a different project that we want to say something that no one had said before, or change the whole concept of how you present classical music, that it will change it in a way that it will never go back to the same. That kind of very high goals. And then you spend 3 weeks to rehearse instead of 1 week or a few days, like they do in operas or in dance companies or musicals or theaters or whatever. They rehearse, of course, much more than we do. And we could defend ourselves in saying that we don't need that. We need, I know the clarinet concerto that I'm doing, and I just need 1 hour and then I'm fine. But if you do something new, probably you need more time.
I'm curious again about all these disciplines, I guess you could call them, in your performances. Have you actually studied dance, for example, or theater, or is this a skill you've cultivated on a serious level?
No, I never. I never danced, actually. I danced when I was not sober. That's what. And otherwise, no, I never danced. But as I said, if you want to try to do something new, you have to. I always had the passion and the excitement of trying to do things that. I remember the first time when Deinzer, my teacher in Germany, showed me all these composers that tried to break the codes for something like Boulez and the Stockhausen or any of those guys, and of course I was fascinated by the fact that they tried to do something. And we see in the history that these guys, the composers, all the conductors, some of the conductors as well, I mean Bernstein and these kind of historical person that really tried to change things. And I think that's an important thing that we should talk about more, not only going in a direction that we had so much other focus in our business than if you compare. I think that's my passion. If you ask about dance, theater, and all these things, I'm a bit fascinated by their way of trying to do new things all the time. And I feel that I have something to learn from them, because my 30 years of my playing has been trying to do the pieces that we already have as good as I can. And that's what we all do. And of course I did premieres and so on, but I think we can go deeper in this subject.
Great. You mentioned Hans Deinzer, and as I told you, and everyone who's been watching the show, we love to shout out to the older generations, especially those that are not with us. Document would you like to share a little bit what he was like, and what some of the things that you took from him and he contributed to you and to clarinet in general, or music in general?
Yeah, I mean, Deinzer was absolutely a very, very important teacher, and he was also a teacher that could teach on a very deep level of music, and I came to him from a very good teacher as well, Sölve Kingstedt in Sweden, and Sölve let me play everything. So I covered, all the concours pieces from France, and I did all the pieces that you can, good and bad, and I was very happy to do all these pieces. And then I came to Deinzer, and then I was not allowed to play any of those pieces. I don't think so. So he was he was a German clarinet player, but he was also teaching the big pieces. So if it came to the French repertoire, it was Messiaen and Debussy. And in German repertoire was Brahms, and of course, I mean, all the big pieces that we know. So I was a bit more focusing on modern repertoire and the bigger concertos with him. And what was special about him? I mean, I know that people have different opinion also about him, but for me, it was absolutely fantastic the way he teaches, because he teaches in a way that we could stand for 1 hour with one phrase, or not maybe 1 hour, but 45 minutes with one phrase, and suddenly he said, "Hast du es gefühlt?" And that meant that we had been, it was almost like a meditation or something transcendental about the way that he teaches. And I felt it. Hast du es gefühlt means, did you feel this? And it was always a magical moment when we get to this new step of hearing. It was about listening and shaping, and all the thing that has been fascinating for me from then and all my whole life, actually. I was never a clarinet nerd in the way of trying ligatures and stuff like that. I'm sorry to disappoint you. But I was very fascinated about shaping, breathing, and speaking with the instrument, and the way that he teaches was around this thing all the time. Did you feel this meant? Did you feel this small phrase in Mozart concerto that it was really loved, with colors, with breathing, with, and I understood something very early. I was 18 maybe when I went to Stockholm Royal Music School in Stockholm. Before this, I was 15, which was very early, and then I studied 3 years in Stockholm, and then went on to Deinzer when I was 19.
How long with Deinzer? How long with Deinzer?
It was only 2 years, but then I went back. But then he moved up to Italy in like the Godfather. He made himself a small house on the hill, or up up in the mountain, and I went there many times, and the last time I went there was to prepare Geneva competition. Then it was already 95 or something like that, and we were there. I went to him. I stayed in the hotel in the village, and I went up to him every day and took lessons. But the way he teaches was very special in this way, that he could get you to take this new step, and then you never went back. That was the feeling that I had. If you hear this subtle nuance in the way of playing and listening, you are on the new step on this stair, and you feel that this is something new. I've never been here before, and I will never go back to where I was. And I hear something that I never heard, and this will stay with me, and I will go on from this. And that was the secret of his teaching, I think, that he could get people to, how do you say in English? I think something with awakenings, like he got your ears to get bigger and bigger all the time, and hear all these kind of things.
Mm.
Yeah.
You mentioned you went there to do an intensive training for the Geneva competition. Do you have experiences or thoughts on competitions as either a judge or a contestant or philosophically generally?
It was 5 questions in one. So the first question, yes, I have experience. I only did the Geneva, but I was lucky enough to have the first prize, and I didn't like it at all. I was terrified by the whole situation. I was very nervous, and I remember still when I went there, it was 226 clarinet playing Stravinsky's solo pieces. I stayed in a hotel. I remember a very, very bad hotel, and I remember it was around 50, 60 clarinet players in the same hotel, and they were practicing exactly the same, these tricky places. And I lied down on my bed, I remember, and had my headphones on and playing loud music so I couldn't hear them because I got stressed. And then I went to the first round, and actually I had a memory slip in the first round, a small. So I was sure that I was out because I just thought that some will hit all the notes. So I packed my bag and changed my ticket. But then I went through. So, and then it was, to the second round was much, much less people. And then it went better and better, and I got my confidence back. And that was the story about that. So that was a mixed feeling about it. So, but it was, of course, it helped me a lot. I got some other prize. I can't remember them now, but I got Axel Nobel, and I think it was Rolex or something, who was there and gave the prizes to someone. So in that time after, I got orchestras on another level, I would say. So I got to play with the Philharmonia and some, I think it was NHK, and good orchestras that I never came close to before that. So that meant a lot. And then after a couple of years later, just 3-4 years, I was actually sitting in all the juries, which was also mixed feeling, I would say. Let's be honest. So I really like, I think there also you should discuss how you can change competitions in a good way. So right now I'm in discussion with the Nielsen competition, how we should then, and that's a very interesting discussion. So I really hope that you could take care of more people, more gifted people. Because, for example, what I didn't like in the jury situation was, I remember the first jury that I sat in was, I think it was in Munich competition. And actually it was funny because it was fantastic teachers from the, let's say, a little bit older generation than me. So it was Michel Arignon, and it was Hans Deinzer sitting as, they took care of the jury. And I remember Deinzer said, in the first meeting that we had, he said, "You are too hard when you put points." Because in some way, and this is how I remember, you have to remember, I was very, very young in this time. I was 27 or 28. I could have done the competition myself, actually. But I really believe what they say, because what I felt that all these people, I will not mention any names, but all these people put some prestige or something, that they put quite low points and wanted to show how high demands they had on these people. And I was young enough to feel that I know the feeling that they have now. And I saw some really gifted people flying out in the second round because they were just, they were nervous, and it was a bit sad to see. And of course, when we had the winner, it was fantastic because that winner was great. So it was no doubt about the winner. But it's a complicated thing with how you could manage to get that environment better. But I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I discussed with some people how you could change the situation there. A competition is a competition, so it's all about winning, of course. But I did some really big mistakes as a jury member as well, because I remember I wrote what I thought was good things, and I put them, this is the people that I want to hear once again. And quite often these people went through. So I have written too little about the people who were not going through, which was a big mistake. Because the people who don't get through, they want to hear what you think.
Yeah.
So I learned very quickly that. Actually, I thought about it, and I discussed it with some people, Yehuda Gilad, I discussed it with. to meet up with people who don't get through and to talk to them. And they are the people. I mean, the winner takes it all anyway. So maybe you should have some possibility for people to talk and maybe have master classes with people in the jury, like they didn't went to the third run or something.
As a juror, was it at all enlightening, having been a contestant and having all the things that you just described plus many more? I'm sure. Oh, I had a memory slip. I must be out. Oh, I won. Oh, this. Oh, you know, hundreds of people playing. All these concepts of what you thought would lead to success, the importance, what was going on in the jury. Was there any surprises when you ended up on the jury, sort of saying, "Oh, that's funny," because when I was a contestant, you know, I didn't think this was going on behind the scenes, or a concept maybe of what was important to you as a contestant that you realized later on, listening to hundreds of people, maybe something else was important, or anything like that? Any epiphanies?
Yeah, probably it was lots of epiphanies, and I can't remember them all now. What you mean when I went to the jury? But my way of doing things and my way of when I'm performing, my wife always said to me that I'm like living on a different planet, because I think it's more a way of saying that I'm very, very focused on the here and now, and I'm very, very focused on what I'm doing. So even when I did the competition, I remember that after the first round, every single performance was like a concert for me. And I didn't really think of anything except what I did, the music and what I did. So, of course, when you sit in a jury, then it's about something else. And that's a much trickier situation. And I understand, I don't want to talk down competition, because I really understand that it has to be competition, but the situation for just to sit there and judge people, or like, it's a very strange situation. I'm more interested in my foundation and to encourage people and helping people, and not sitting down and think, why does he play like that, or why does he do like this? It's not really me. And that's why I didn't sit in any competition after this. So I did them all when I was under 30, and then I didn't come back.
Well, that's great. First of all, I'd like to thank Buffet Crampon, who's actually live streaming this concert. So let's talk. I'd be amiss if I didn't mention our dear mutual friend Herman Stefansson, who's the principal clarinetist of the Stockholm Philharmonic, and a good friend of Martin's and myself. And the poor guy, I'm always debriefing him. You know, we had an interview in our own right to help me with Yehuda's interview, and I had an interview in our own right to help me with your interview, and so on. So, but you mentioned your foundation rather. So I just mentioned Buffet Crampon and Herman Stefansson. So why don't you talk about this foundation in case people don't know about it, and what it is, who participates in it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, Herman Stefansson is not only one of the really important teachers of today, he's also involved, he's a great friend of mine, and he's involved in this foundation in a very concrete way. So we have a board, we have also an advisory board, and Buffet Crampon, of course, is a very important player here, because that was the main idea. When I got the idea with the foundation, was that I wanted Buffet Crampon to be on board. So they have been very generous and sponsored the foundation with instrument. And we have we started actually. What we did was, I have been playing and sponsoring concerts and so on, and some money has come in, and immediately we have spent the money. So we are not the foundation that collect a lot of money. So we started it quite quickly. This was 1 year ago. It's just 1 year old, the foundation, and we started then 3 projects. So one in Madagascar, one in Afghanistan, and one in Kenya. And so we had teachers there. We had projects going on right now as we speak. And Herman Stefansson is in charge of spending the money and getting projects to work, and he's in charge of the contact with the advisory board, and getting good ideas, because I mean the ideas is not actually, we have a lot of interest, and people really need help, so that's not a problem. I think the main problem, as always, is the money. So right now, during the pandemic, I haven't done anything for the money, I have to admit. So before that, I played, and I got people who could afford it to sponsor the foundation. But we are now in the process to start up again. So it will be interesting projects coming up very soon.
So what? Well, give us 2 bits of information. We shamelessly plug things here. It's okay. So first of all, if someone wanted to give a donation, where would they find the place to do that? Let's start with that.
Yeah, they go into the foundation's website, which they can. I think they can go via mine, or just to martinfrostfoundation.com or .se. I can't remember now, but it's very easy to find.
.com, Lorenzo, .com, martinfrost.com, right? Yeah. Okay.
And then they follow the signs where it says donate.
Right.
So
he's going to put it up in the messages in case anyone's interested. And would you mind being more specific about some of the projects that you actually do? I mean, what are the ways you're trying? Actually, what's some of the big picture? Is there a mission statement? Number one, and number two, what are some of the small avenues that you're trying to get there with specific projects?
Yeah, the problem with foundation, as I learned it, with these rules around it, that if you have a foundation that, if you have too much limitation around this is the frame, what we try to help with, if that is too limited, you can get problems in the future, because then suddenly you have a foundation for, widows that plays the guitars and have, special things, and it's not, the money cannot go anywhere. But so we made it quite broad, but it has to do with education, and it has to do to help people mainly with instrument, because we have buffet on board, and with education to change also the way we perform classical music, what we have been talking a bit about, you and I, early in the program. And these are the 3 main subjects. So we have, and that's why it's quite broad. And the project that we have been starting I think it's only about education, and giving good high-level instrument to people that cannot afford it. I think we will go more into education, and when I get more and more involved in this and on board, it will also be about performing and education in that sense.
Beautiful.
But it's a very, I would say it's also this kind of what we talked about, the passion. Where do we go from now? And I think to have this foundation is something that when you've done something for so long time as I've done, I mean, I played for over 30 years and traveling around the globe for at least, 30 years. And then if you get this foundation and suddenly I think it's payback time in one way, and it's also trying to or give back something that the people that you have been interviewed before me has so beautifully done and are doing all the time. Maybe I will do more and more from that as well. But I'm not teaching. You said in the program in the beginning that I was teaching. Actually, I'm not teaching in the Royal Academy.
Yes. Why don't we extrapolate on them? Maybe I have a misconception. So, do you teach? I mean, do one faculty?
I love the concept. I love the thought of me. I mean, I'm doing master classes all the time. As when I come to a town, a bigger town, or any town, I do master classes. That's what I'm doing. But I don't have a position like Herman. I've been some. Have I? Yes, I have done 1 or 2 master classes in the past 5 years for the here also in the Stockholm. But generally, so I wouldn't say I'm a teacher, but I love to teach. So I'm not. I have big respect about this, about all the teachers that I know, and it's not that I don't like it. It's more about what is the most effective way for me to help. And I think besides doing what I'm doing with playing and so on, it's also with my foundation master classes, of course, and just to meet up people. Sometimes I just have question and answer after concert, and some countries are it's lots of clarinet players in the concert, so you can really spend a long time after the concert if you want to, which is lovely. I mean, so we have different roles in this, and I think I'm slowly finding my roles in this, and I like it. And yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, have you ever had, or do you have regular students? I mean, I understand you're traveling, you're busy, but people you see once or twice a month for more than a year. Have you ever had that? Or
I had it with some students here in Stockholm, because also Herman invited me to do that, and so I had some diploma students, and also, but I'm a bit careful to say it, because I think if I meant something to them, it's great, and I'm sure I did. But I also want to be clear that I could not take credit for their fantastic playing, because also the teacher here in Stockholm made a fantastic work. So I want to credit them. So because it's very easy that I say, oh, this is my student, and then, or anything, and then I just telling not the truth, actually, because I think that the big thing with teaching is to meet the student regularly and be there for them. And probably I've been there for them 1 or 2 years, with, as you said, 1 month between. But Herman and his colleague has done a much more substantial work. So no, I'm very, very happy that, actually, I'm very happy that Sweden and Stockholm has such an incredible level of players in the school.
great.
And if you look at, for example, my orchestra with Kevin and Alberto, as you mentioned in the beginning, I mean, they are top players, really, really top players. So you always we are very, very spoiled with great clarinet players here in Scandinavia.
Beautiful. Great. Well, so you mentioned your master classes. I usually reserve it for the end of the towards the end of the interview, but I am curious. I mean, you're talking about different levels. You're talking about different kinds of teachers, different involvement as teachers. So, generally speaking, what do you find in students worldwide or players worldwide that when you do give classes, you tend to go to I mean, give us a little hint into your priorities, but B, sort of your general impression of clarinetists worldwide with different styles, things maybe they're lacking that you'd like to see change or anything like that.
You mean go to each country, or just generally speaking?
Generally, I'm saying you're dealing with many clarinet players worldwide in a period of time, all with different backgrounds. Are there general things that you tend to gravitate towards when you teach them? You wish there was a little bit more of this in clarinet players' education, or that's especially good, or anything like that you tend to work on with them.
Yeah, my general impression when I listen to people, or actually it's about everything that is about music, and it doesn't matter if it's clarinet students or any students or musician or orchestras, that we, of course, we're getting better and better all the time. Like if you compare to sports, I mean, I'm sure Messi and Ronaldo is, it's hard to compare, but everyone gets better and better. So Ronaldo is better than Maradona was, and you can't compare it because they are connected to their times. And that's the same in music. So we always approve through the recording industry, through the way the development of anything. But that's not the same as that we have more to tell, more things to say, and more. That's something totally different. And I think sometimes when I listen to a class, it's in my mind that you get all the tools, or you have all your tools, and some players really have them, but you don't know what to say. and you don't know what your story is here. And I think I wouldn't say that it's a well, I would say it's a problem of the future. So because there's always more stories to tell, and it's always more pieces to write, and you don't have a clue how the future will be. But one, you can always say that maybe the most fantastic music is not written yet. We don't know anything. So, but what you can see is that everyone gets better and better, and not. You can see it in every filmmakers, everything. They get more and more technique, more and more money. But if you look at Ingmar Bergman, for example, the Swedish director, he had no money at all in the beginning, and he really knew what to say, what he wanted to say. So this is something you could start to talk about with students. And as I mentioned in the beginning, and my time with Deinzer and so on, the most fascinating thing, if you want to list them, is breathing and shaping and colors and sound, and learn to speak with their instrument. That was 5 things. But let's keep really the eye on the right things. And I think for me, this is the most fascinating thing. I'm very fascinated. I think I'm more of making sculpture with sound and music than really to play notes. And I think that's the way we should do music. And actually, clarinet is a fantastic instrument in this case, because it has this thin line between silence and sound. It has an enormous possibility with colors and dynamics, and you can speak in so many ways. So I always listen to a lot of players, and not only classical players. I remember when I first heard Jorah Feidman, and when I was 14, and how he whispered and screamed and cried and everything he did in this instrument. And now, of course, I couldn't do it, and I still can't do it. But it's just very important to hear this storyteller. And I remember also when I listened to Charlie Naidish when he came, then I was 15, 16, with this recording with, I can't remember the orchestra. I think it was Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, I think it was, with this quite fresh reading of Mozart concertos and Weber concertos. And the people who really try to open new doors of saying something, and you said, this is something different, and they have their own voice. And we have lots of this player, of course, in the world, and not only in the classical field, and lots of clarinet players. Do you hear all the kids? Because we have lots of kids in the house.
How many kids?
Well, I have only 2, but they are cooking, and they have lots of friends. So I wonder if they are, because now they're sort of, or they play football in the living room. I don't know what they're doing, but you can't. It's not disturbing.
We don't hear them. They don't disturb us. But I told you, I mean, we've had people show off their dogs, and we've had
relax. Very good.
Come in and complain that that they left the lights on somewhere, and all of a sudden the views go through the roof. Everyone loves to see.
Yeah. Okay. But we save that moment because maybe we can't get them out. Anyway, no, I don't know if I was too philosophical there, but I just think that's one. So if you think, when I'm listening to, I remember first time when I one of the first master classes that I had, that I listened to a quite good clarinet player, and she was playing, and I saw that she was quite scared, and then, but she did fine. And then suddenly she played the wrong note, and she stopped and apologized and was ashamed and everything. And I felt this anger. I don't know why. I don't know if I can explain this, but of course I was young, so I had not any experience with teaching. But I felt anger because I could have said lots of things to this student, but it would be not anything about what she did the last 2 seconds when she thought she did something wrong, or whatever she thought. So that is something also to talk about, how you improve, and how we are so focused and so concentrated on not doing the wrong thing, and not doing mistakes, and not. And this is something that we have in the whole classical music business. I think it's around playing together. I mean, the greatest fear that an orchestra has is not being together. If in any orchestra, I would say, and of course, everything is being together, and all the things should be there. But that's just a result of what you are trying to achieve. So these are the most dramatic impression about teaching I had when I started to do master classes. So the first one, what are you going to use all the tools to? And the second thing is, if you want to say something or try to do great music, you have to be prepared to do mistakes and to go a bit further than you think, because otherwise we will repeat the music history and do things that are already being done. It's like painting Mona Lisa again and again. We will never get any further. Does it sound understandable, or am I? Yeah.
It's understandable. Don't worry. That was great. Very, very, very insightful answer. Thanks. So I mean, I'm actually curious. Like, I know it sounds like I'm about to repeat myself, but I don't think so. When we're talking about how do you move forward, I'm curious about you as both a clarinetist and a musician. I mean, I can only imagine what your schedule's like. I mean, with all kinds of traveling stuff, and I do see, despite the fact that you've complained that you know you're still doing more of the standard stuff, I do see so many innovative ideas and skills that you're incorporating that you know in multimedia, as I said, and all this stuff. But I can't imagine. I mean, just to keep up your standard must take a minimal amount of time and practice and so forth. But then to prepare for the standard repertoire and have it memorized and go, that's all wonderful. But then to also continue and learn more techniques and commission more works, and from what I understand, even memorize works later on in life. It must be a very tricky balance. I mean, for me personally, I've described, I break down practice basically in three ways. Like one, maintenance, two, preparing for what you have, and then the third, which is the hardest, I think, is keeping afloat and also upping your game. Also then improving as a clarinetist, as a musician. In your case, I mean, you're so innovative. You're actually adding techniques. You're adding all kinds of multimedia things, dancing skills, speaking. I've seen you philosophize on stage. I mean, how do you do it all? How do you balance it all? I mean, it sounds like a silly question, but I'm absolutely fascinated by it.
Yeah, I think it's no really good answer. I think we are all playing with our limitation as artists, which I think is good. And we are all impressed by learning quickly and memorizing quickly. And I always thought it was hard to compare anything in this area, because no one know how much you're practicing to learn the concerto, and no one knows. I mean, they know if I say that I got the concerto 5 weeks before the first premiere, then I probably practice 10 hours a day on that piece. But besides that, I have learned that my limitation is also a very good thing. And you can see it in the music history, that the people that you really admire, doesn't matter if it's David Bowie or Miles Davis or anyone in the classical field that you really admire, they had limitation, but they just had the way of using them in a fantastic way. And when it comes to myself, I think my passion and the way of, like I said before, I'm on another planet, my wife said, is also the creative process in my mind is like opium. It's a fantastic drug, and we love it. And I'm sometimes more in my dreams than I'm actually a musician. And lots of the project that I'm planning and trying to do takes quite much time. If I read, I have working books, which I write down when I'm traveling. So I can see that an idea that I get 5 years before I do it just was a little embryo and a little birth to an idea. This is what you can do in the future. And then I do them, but it took some time for the brain to digest and everything. And another thing is planning, because as my life is now, I have the possibility to plan a lot, because I have my schedule. I'm planning a residence residencies for 22, 23, and even 23, 24 now. So I can really place the first performance where I want them. And when I see then, so I have 3 female composer coming up in the future, and I place them in a very good position where I know that I will have some times before to do good work. But the other thing that you touched, which is could be problematic, that's the projects. If I do a project that's like playing piano with 5 hands, it's really difficult in the beginning. And it's not that I'm particularly good at when it comes to movements or speaking from stage. I'm very shy and so on. So I think this is just a will and a desire to try to get on the side where we can shake. Sometimes I just feel one foot is in fiasco and the other one is in some artistic development. But I'm not sure when I start that this is going to be great. So that's a very uncomfortable feeling sometimes. But I sometimes think that I have always been an uncomfortable person, so it doesn't matter what I'm doing. And I was also that with music, so it didn't really matter what I did. So if I played a concerto, if I did a project, which I'm doing more, it didn't really matter because I was so sometimes uncomfortable with the whole thing. But I was never uncomfortable with the music itself. I loved to play when I was a kid. I loved to sing or anything. So it's good to go back to the reason why we started sometimes, and there also where I'm feeling that I get back my roots and get back the power.
Mm. How do you do that? Is there a way where you start getting, like you said, you're half in chaos sometimes and half fear, and once in a while, do you have to tell yourself, you have to remind yourself, is there something you do, just listen to an old CD that you listened to when you were 12 or practice, play a piece that reminds you of the very first time you were enamored by something about the clarinet or anything like that?
I think to say, I'm saying that I'm a very chaotic person, but that doesn't say that I have lots of discipline. So when you are very much all over the place, you are trying to get yourself in a good frame. And of course, that's what I'm trying as well. So I always, I think that I remember when I was studying with Deinzer, I had a fantastic student, a friend that was a fantastic clarinet player. And I remember he was so angry that I was that I didn't have discipline, that I was doing all kinds of things that didn't have to do with clarinet practice. And I remember when I disturbed him in the practicing room, it was a great friend, Per Johansson is his name, and he was such a focused guy. I remember he was doing his sound practicing for 2 hours, and he came out like a new person. And I was just, I was having a lot of other thing going on in my brain. So I was very chaotic, but then I learned how to discipline all in, and I put myself in a frame, and that frame could be quite small sometimes, but I felt free in that frame. So that was the way I created my study and so on. Maybe that was not the answer on your question, but what did you actually?
Hey, your answers are so good at that. Forget my questions.
Yeah. But I thought a little bit more about it, and when it comes to write, you said something about how do you?
Yeah, once in a while, you touched a nerve in me when you were talking about sometimes you go back to just why did I play the clarinet? Why do I like it? And I remember I've dealt with my own students sometimes who they've just taken a lesson, they've been in master class, and they come and they feel terrible with someone else or whatever. And well, what do you want to do? And they go right back to like a study or something that we did. So then it grounds them. I think you used the word grounding. That once in a while, you remind yourself of the basics of
yeah. Well, it could be way back in your life. I think if you said that touches you, that's a good. Maybe that's also important thing. Just philosophical and meditate around it, like going back to some roots in your own brain. That why do you start to do this? That's a good way, because I feel still I will get 50 soon, and I feel very much that have not educate myself out from or out of my creativity, or how do you say, growing out of my I'm still like a child in my head. I want to create things, and I think that's also a way of, you know, living, like you should be stay there where you know this is the reason why I started to play, because they are very strong, and they are almost always positive. Like you felt something when you heard your mother sing or sang, or you heard a piece, or you met a clarinet player or whatever, or any players, and then you suddenly you got in a mood, or it's really got into your body and soul, and that feeling you have to have your whole life. If you go away from that feeling, then you're in big trouble. And I think it happened to all the people, and it happened to me as well. And the other thing that we were talking about, when you have this feeling, then of course to get all these frame. Now I'm talking about this is education, actually, what I'm talking about now. And I think also that the way, for me, for example, I had a big crisis 5 years ago, because I got this disease, Meniere. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's inner ear inflammation, which is then quite dramatic, because you get to rotational vertigo, and you can't really function. You just lie on the floor, and you miss. You also lose your hearing, but that comes back in my case. So I still hear like a 12-year-old, but it's a very dramatic thing, and it comes in episodes, and it came very dramatic 2015, and then from then I changed my life very complete. So I stopped with alcohol. I changed my diet, and I started to move my body much more, and meditate. And what was the fifth thing that I do a lot? I mean, I don't stress, for example. I did some changes that maybe was good for the disease. I don't know, because it comes now. It comes only when I'm free, when I'm lying in my, when I don't have any concert, like the Christmas holiday or something. I don't know if it comes in, but
you can control when you get the disease.
Yeah, maybe. But my point is that also creates a frame, and it's a good frame for me, because I'm a very chaotic person, as I said, and I really like the way that I'm very motivated of keeping these. And I think the same thing when you work with an orchestra. If you have great frames, you can be extremely creative in that little frame, and you can really talk about this frame in such a small thing that if you're talking about what an orchestra should do when you play, you can give them so small frame that this is allowed in this frame, and here you can feel totally free. And that could be a very good key and secret for an orchestra to do music, because we have to have frames and limitation when we do music. Especially in classical music. I mean, I play with some jazz players, and I just realized they count to 4, and then they go, and they feel free like birds. And when I play, I have moments, I would say, in a Mozart concerto when I feel totally free. And that moment could be very, very short and very small, but it's always very, very, very strong. So I live for this moment but I think that's a quite good comparison between classical music and other genres. So you're longing for this freedom, and they are quite, for me anyway, the magic is quite, it doesn't happen all the time.
I think you're a perfect person to ask. I mean, you've been talking about all the genres, and you've got everything from foundations to we've been talking about teaching and everything. What do you, and COVID and the future of performances?
Oh,
I told you I should have showered, Lorenzo.
I've got to cook.
It's hi, you
cooking in the kitchen. So it's for Anna.
Yeah.
Great.
Looks great. So,
sorry.
What do you think the role of a musician is in society?
A role of
a musician? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? How do we fit into society? What are we trying to do?
what you can see, I mean, I got a lot. I when I did interviews during the pandemic, the question comes up, and we are talking about how did this pandemic affect you as a musician, and how is blah blah blah. And I always felt that it didn't affect me at all. That I was doing my creative thing in my mind, and I could practice my clarinet because I'm a musician, and I mean, it was sort of less concerts, of course it was, but it didn't affect me mentally so much in the first couple of months. But then I thought again. I actually thought the other day, and what it did was that you suddenly look back on what you have been doing, first of all, the last 30 years, and then you suddenly get a not critical eye, but you just see it very clearly. What this is what I've been doing. I remember it very clearly because the other week I went to Copenhagen, and that was one of the first trips actually I did, and I felt, wow, this is your life. It's quite. I mean, it's a fantastic life. I should never complain. But in that week, I said, this is quite lonely what you're doing. I mean, you're going around, you're traveling, and then you get and I've never thought about that. I never thought about it so clear. I mean, it's very obvious. Everyone knows that the soloist is lonely, but I never thought about it. So that was one of the things. And the other thing that I think is really important to realize in this pandemic, that is we are made to meet. I mean, it's very nice to meet you like this, but that's not what we are meant to do. We are meant to meet physical. We are meant to touch each other and to, I mean, physical, hold each other. And I think what I've learned now is that comes to me quite strong. That the live performance is super important. The lack of contact between human beings is horrible in one way, and that we really need it. So with all the respect for all the digital things that happening in the pandemic and the streaming, I think when it comes to streaming, I think it will eat up itself because it's just too much of it. And I think we have to find a way going back to meet. And I read a little bit about it, and I saw some research also about America that they said that the research came out like never felt the American people so lonely. They did test this, and of course that was a big paradox because you said you communicate more than ever with all the social media and everything. You know, you have more friends than ever, but the brains tell you something else. The brains doesn't understand that we are, because it needs smells, it needs touching, it needs more than that. And I think maybe you can't translate it totally, but you can translate that into a musical get together, whether it's about just making chamber music, for example. It's a physical feeling. Making chamber music in a small hall, it's also a very physical. Music is very physical in one way. You're talking about dancing and everything. You can really say that musical has an intellectual side. It's a soulful side, and it's also a physical side of music that is very obvious when you hear it, when you hear the sound, when you feel the sound. And that will never, you can never let the digital world take over that, because it will never work. And that has to do that we are used to do this for 70,000 years. We cannot change now. I think we will never change that fast anyway. So I'm longing for that, and I think that, again, your question is, I forgot it, but anyway.
My question is forgettable, but your answers are not. So don't worry.
No, it's a good question. I think also that is the way that we realize this longing is a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic thing that we start to long for a hug, or for playing music in a room with people that you don't know anything about, but you realize it's any kind of human being sitting there and listen. And for them as well, I'm longing to go to. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion. Oh, I miss my audience. That's quite a big vanity, right? I would say I miss also very, very much to go to a theater, or to see or listen to a concert. And when I played the first concert, I think it was 50 people. And it was an enormous, overwhelming experience for me. I felt these people, they were clapping, and it was a very, very touching moment for me. And that after played 30 years with, I mean, everything from 500 to 6,000 people, or to 30,000 people if it outside concerts. And so we learned something about it, not only how we should go on, but also what is important for the human being in this thing. And it's a very good thing to realize.
I'm speaking of community and relationships and music all day. As I said, the one time I did hear you in Hong Kong was, I believe, with your brother playing. I'm just curious about your relationship and musical relationship and influence and so forth. But particularly, I think he's written or arranged some very important staples of your repertoire. Would that be accurate to say?
I have 25 brothers, and they are all I have more than one brother. So you met my bigger brothers, and he's a pianist, and my younger brother, he's a arranger and composer and viola player, and that's the guy. I mean, he started to arrange pieces, mainly the klezmer dances that I started to do maybe 10 years ago, and they like encores. He's doing a lot of encores, and it has been very successful. And I remember, I saw it because they went up on YouTube, and this time YouTube was not new, but there were a time where it was quite useful. And when I introduced these, especially in New York, for example, where it's very popular with these kind of encores, and when I introduced the encore, everyone knew them because they looked at them, and so to play them in Lincoln Center or in Carnegie Hall was a very special thing for me when I started to do that. So I kept on doing them. There were 3 of them, and he's writing more, and I like to do it. And he's then composed some pieces that we put in the projects. One piece called Nomedia, which was in the latest project which I did, it was called Retrotopia. And he also do now arrangement on several pieces that I want him to do. So he's the important collaborator for me when it comes to arrangement, and I don't do it myself. So.
Do you have any other siblings besides the 2 brothers?
We have 3 brothers. We have 3 brothers.
Is he a musician of any sort?
Both of them are musicians. So you met the pianist, who is the old one, and then sorry.
Oh, right. I see. Okay, right. So the 3. So you're all musicians, and you collaborate with them as performers, and that's wonderful. That must be a terrific, extra special relationship.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, did I hear correctly? You're making well. Let's talk a little bit about your conducting. You have a Swedish chamber orchestra.
Yeah, Swedish chamber orchestra.
Did I hear correctly? You're making them memorize the music in concerts.
Yeah, we did. We have done it already. We do it for the tour, spring 2021, and we did last week. We did a recording with the Beethoven First Symphony, which they also play by heart.
Wow!
Standing up and play by heart, and
wow,
it was a great experience. I mean, you have to have respect that different musicians are different, have different relation to playing by heart, but it's so many good sides. They learn the music very, very careful. They feel freer. They can look and communicate with each other and with me in another way, and it's a great way. And they probably, maybe I push them a bit, but it's also that they know that I try to learn all my stuff by heart. So I'm not standing there and demand something that I haven't done myself. So, and I don't think you could compare learning a score by heart. It's a different story. It's not more difficult or not easier, but it's just a different story.
Wow,
but it's a great work, and it's a world-class orchestra, and they have been doing this for many decades before me. But I feel that this journey is a very special journey that we are starting now, and I'm also translate my contract with Sony Classical to have quite much to do with them. So we're doing 3 projects with Sony Classical, So I will record the Mozart concerto for the third time with them, and together with the Prague Symphony and other stuff. And they will play by heart, and I will lead and play. So that's a great journey we will now start. I'm very happy about it. I mean, it's also, as you said, how do I do with my time? And I really realized that when you try to limit it yourself, you are always competed with this passion that you want to do so many things. And of course, conducting foundation, playing projects, teaching masterclass and everything, of course, it's a lot of work. And I was said, you have to have really respect for the conducting thing, because you have to learn score in the right speed and really study them carefully. So I do that quite much. So I don't read too many books right now. So I'm studying score, and I practice, and I do my stuff. But
you compose a little bit yourself, don't you?
No, well, I done a little bit, but I will never call me a composer. I did some pieces together with my brother, which was a great fun. We sort of really composed it together. We had Sibelius program, both of us, and we sent the files between us, and one writes something and then that goes to the other, and so we did this piece together, and it was quite fascinating journey. Mm-hmm. And actually, for the pieces that I'm doing, either Brahms Hungarian dances or klezmer dances or whatever, I also do my parts quite much myself. So that's also one way to work, and I think that's could have worked a little bit like that in the history as well. I mean, nowadays especially, you can see of some composer written to some player, you see the players in the music quite much. Mm-hmm. I have done both. Actually, I have worked very. Some composer just write the concerto, I'm getting it, and some composer have been involved and suggest things that I could do that, or I can sing and play, or I can do this tremolo or whatever. That could be also a possibility to work. I think both are good.
People do write in questions. Often we don't have time to get to them, but I'm actually a little bit curious. It seems like a very basic question, but while you're talking about all these new projects, I myself, I can only put myself in my imagination in your shoes, and what I could see myself not always feeling 100% prepared for every time I'm memorizing this new piece. Someone writes in, how do you deal with stage fright? Is this something you've ever experienced? Are you one of these people who gets nervous, or are you just always confident and ready to go? Any tips on that?
No, I'm absolutely not. I'm human, and I actually had a lot of not a lot, but I had some Q&A about it on social media platforms, and also live when I meet people, and it's also a very important subject, of course. I would say in my case, it's like this. After you get a really, like I got 6 years ago with this Meniere disease, when you really get on the floor for something totally different, and of course it's a crisis, and it's not, you don't die of it, but you have to face the music in that sense that you have to really to deal with something very, very careful. And what's happening then in a very positive way is that suddenly you have you focus, you never focus again on the wrong thing, because you know what it's all about, and therefore you get much freer as a musician, and you stop put energy on things that you can't really control anyway, for example, or you put a lot of energy on things that you really can control. And or can change, for example. People who have what did you call it? Stage
fright, or just being nervous.
Yeah, exactly. So this kind of subject is a big subject, and it's also very different for people what the problem is. And so I have still a very big what is the English word for that? Anxious about different things which is connected to performing. And I would say one of the fear is that you can't blow life into the piece that you should perform, for example. That's a big fear, and of course it has to do with nerves, but it's like just if I play in New York or in Concertgebouw, for example, I've done Mozart concerto in Concertgebouw over 20 times, and in New York around 10 times maybe. And when you come there and play the same piece, it's quite easy that the brain start to get the wrong attitude to why you are doing it again. I mean, just do it as good as the last time and don't mess up or whatever. You know, that's a very, very bad, how do you say, bad
Attitude.
attitude. That's right. And so the way of giving life into music, and that's a big passion for me. And I think that, again, I said before that I was a very uncomfortable person, but I say also now that this is also one of my talents, because when you have this attitude, then you will never be like, oh, I can do this, it's no problem, I have great technique and I have such a good sound, just look and show and listen, this is how it should be. I have never done this in my whole life, which also gives a feeling that you are so much alive all the time. And even if I know that this is an uncomfortable situation, and I think when I'm 60 and 70, I will always have this feeling that it could be better, and it could, oh my God, it's not good enough, and so on. But will be always alive, and it will always be a big thing for me to play a concert. And I don't think it's a bad thing, actually. And that doesn't matter which repertoire. It could be easier when he's a great composer. It's always easier if you're great. So every time I start to play Mozart concerto, I get the same feeling as when I was 14 to play and played it for the first time with orchestra. It's exactly the same feeling. I get this strong physical feeling, and I have to breathe myself through the first bars, and it's a fantastic experience for me. And when that stops, I think I have to think again, because I think that's how music should be, alive, and also to listen to it. I mean, I am sure you agree that if you listen to any singers or players, that when you hear this, you know, the free flying, high flying birds that do things that you never heard of, and they are probably very strong, but they are also very fragile as musicians, and then suddenly they touch you and you really don't know why, and you feel, you can hear that they get a lot of details in their phrasing, and the sound is fantastic, whatever. But it could have been a folk musician or a classical piece or whatever, but it's something that this strong voice has that touch your heart. And I think you should be careful to have to keep that, or not keep, but to feed that kind of energy in yourself and as a listener as well. I think that's my mission, and my way of living a musical life, to have this we know so little about everything, actually, when it comes to the truth, and actually for the future as well. So let's enjoy the ride. And I said it, I remember when I was in Juilliard and had this master class, I got that very clever question. I can't remember who it was. It was about, what would you have told yourself as an advice when you were 20 years old, if you could do it now? And I was very unprepared for the question. It was maybe, at least 150 people listening, or maybe more. And I was and the first thing that came to my mind, I said, I would have told myself, enjoy more. And that's the truth for me. So, but it's not a bad advice, because I realized that I heard this, Leonard Cohen gave an interview, a fantastic interview, and this interview was a woman, and she was totally starstruck, and she said, you are so fantastic, and you have so big success, and you played and sang everywhere, and all the women loved you, and you had everything. What is your view on yourself? What do you think about it? And he said, I mainly gave myself a bad review after, and it was so sad to hear it. I was drawn to these to this occasion and the concerts, but I was never any good at enjoy them. And I think I could really say that about myself as well. I would never say that I, celebrate my debut wherever a lot, and I was happy about it for 2 weeks. I was 20 minutes after the performance, I was on to the next thing in my mind. And of course, it's a good thing, and if you want to really be good at something, to have that approach. But to look in the back mirror, I would say, try to enjoy and try to create and enjoy, and being very ambitious and practice a lot and listen to your teachers and say, what tools, what are the things that you have to learn, and what should you do with the tools, but then get yourself in a state where you really can enjoy what you're doing. Because you never know when it's going to end anyway. And I can say about myself that I have been much better on this lately. So I'm enjoying, especially as a conductor, maybe even more, because then you are a bit more, you don't have this focus on you on the same time as you're performing, if you compare to being a clarinet player. But also a clarinet player, I think, I'm not sure if maybe this, maybe you can't relate to that, Andy. I mean, maybe you are an enjoyer.
Oh no, I'm getting a lot out of what you're saying.
Okay, you can say that it's sensitive to talk about. I'm very honest with you now, and I think that. But as I said, it's payback time for me. And even if I was, successful and I did good recordings and everything, I could say that I really want to tell people that I think they should enjoy what they're doing as much as possible.
Great. You're also quite before you were talking about Mozart concerto, you bring that up. Well, a few clarinetists have brought that piece up, but I noticed one of your projects is Mozart Historic Footprint. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell us about that? And also, I mean, I guess you're quite a green person, as they say. You don't like you take trains instead of planes, whatever.
You do what you can, and I mean, we're all going to realize sooner or later, and this pandemic plus the climate crisis sooner or later we will realize that we have to take care of the climate and everything, but as a musician, of course, you want to do everything you can, and I have, of course, as we all have, been not a good example in the past. I mean, I've had 250 travel days a year for 30 years. That's not climate friendly way of traveling. But I said to myself, I think I was last time they had a Nobel Prize ceremony 2 years ago. Then I realized that they wanted to do something for the climate, and some of the celebrities dressed in second-hand clothes or whatever, and they dressed up very beautiful, but they have been made from second-hand clothes. And then I said to myself, or I said it to some journalist, I remember that, of course, this does nothing for the climate. I mean, they could have done anything, but it's a statement. It's something that shows this is what you can do. I go on the Nobel Prize ceremony party and I dress like this. And what you are after, I mean, what I want to say with that is that I had an idea that this is also good for orchestra touring. So we are planning this tour with the Swedish Chamber Orchestra in March 21 with as green as possible. I think we gonna manage this, if I fight for it anyway, to manage really as good as I can, and to go by train from Stockholm and down via Hamburg, Vienna, and all the things in France and Belgium and wherever we are. Try to go by train. If it's over 12 hours or something like that, then we are thinking about taking a plane in this distance. I mean, it's more difficult to come up from here, from Stockholm down, than for the Germans. They travel by train a lot. But the green side of it is like trying to make a statement that this is possible. And I really, really want to encourage all the soloists that could really make a difference. The big piano soloists, the singers, and who can say, I'm traveling by train on this tour. But of course, it really could make a difference for people how they look on touring.
Yeah.
And I
Um,
spoke about in the beginning, I think that the climate crisis could also put a spotlight on this in the future, to what we said about touring in Asia, for example, or in America, wherever. And the European, and everyone goes to the same big cities. And in the same city, if you go to New York, or any big cities, they have enormous, they have such a capacity themselves. They have fantastic orchestras. So again, you said, what shall we do? Why should we do this? This is a good question. I think it's also a philosophical question that you really should ask yourself. What is the reason why we're doing this? And I do it all the way. Especially you're talking about my project, and I think that's a really good question when it comes to, in the last project, for example, Retrotopia, I had this artificial intelligence. And I was, is it artificial intelligence, or is it? I touch the air, and in the air is a space. You probably saw it maybe on YouTube, and you can play on the DNA of the music with your hands. So when I touch it, I have stronger, softer, and you create this phrase. And I play with 14 clarinet players in my cadenza, and the orchestra is behind me. So I was premiered with the Pekka Salonen, and then I did myself actually on my project with the Retrotopia. And of course, when you start to do new things like that, it's a good question. Why are we doing this? What shall we show with this? And you also, it's very hard to see. I remember the composer Jesper Nordin said this very clearly to me. It's so hard to see when something is happening in our work, what it's going to be, will emerge from this, what will come out of this when it's really happening. It's very easy to see after what was going on, what were we doing when we did this. But I think the question that you are saying, why are we doing this? This is a good question. It doesn't mean that you should stop with anything. It's just, is this a good thing? I can tell you the little game that I have 10 years ago when I said, look in the future back mirror and say, why am I happy about this, or do I want to change things about my musical life? And I said it to so many friends when I was traveling. And then I met the friends after a couple of months or a few, and they actually, I stopped my string quartet and I start with this, or why did you do this? I said, and well, actually, because you were saying this, you should think about that and that. So actually, it's good in any case to ask yourself this question, and maybe, why did you start this great show? Probably you had your reasons, and apparently it's very successful and gives a lot to lots of people. But you had a little trigger why you started, and maybe that was the question. Why should you do the things that you are doing? It's a good way of the question is good. It's not any easier answer, but I like the question.
Did you what do you, well, actually, do you have any I'm already intrigued just by the little details, like making the orchestra memorize something, that to me, and standing up, that's already something. It doesn't sound like much, but in my own experience of going to many concerts, it's not a common thing. And now you've got your projects where you're on train and recording it with the orchestra. Do you have some exciting projects that you want to share, some maybe even more breaking boundaries or something as a conductor with your orchestra or any other orchestra?
One thought that came to me now, it doesn't really have to do with your question, a little bit, but it's one thing that I realize now, because my time, as we said, it's very limited, and I feel sometimes extremely stressed, but also because I'm getting older, I could see that I really like to have a team. And of course I have already lots of teams in the foundation. We spoke about it, and my agent, who are a very creative team around me, and the orchestra administration, and people who helped me. But I also think that you could create teams around what you have been thinking of and asking me this hour, the last hour, that what are we going to go, how are we going to teach that? And in my case, I could take some very simple examples. What should I take? Yeah, for example, now, because of the pandemic, I had to postpone some of the recordings. So this Mozart, going in Mozart's footstep with the Prague Symphony and the Clarinet Concerto will be postponed, the recording. So we were supposed to do it now in May, And instead, Sony is talking that they want to do a more intimate recording, starting like a filler. Can you do something else in the time between? And I just see myself, I really like when I start to nowadays, first before I was much more lonely, but nowadays I like when I can have brainstorming around repertoire and what shall we do? What shall this recording be about? And I think, what do I want to say again? As we talked about, I already record the whole main repertoire. What shall I do? And I also record this Vivaldi recording, which was actually to create new concerto, which was not actually existing before. Which was, by the way, a very interesting project. And now I see that people really want to play this concerto by Vivaldi, but it's actually a reconstruction of Vivaldi. And now I'm into a new recording project, and then I can see myself, it's wonderful to be in a team, that I have lots of artistic advisor and myself as idea sort of, I try to get all my ideas on the table, but to create something together, again, that's what we are made for. Even if you look at the composer, I'm sure they get the ideas from somewhere, someone, and to meet up and to talk about things. It's a fantastic thing. And I would never say that I'm very good at this, but I get better and better. So I have been quite lonely in the past and go for my ideas and I want to say this and I want to create this project or I want to do Mozart concerto in this and this way. But now I'm more open for discussion.
Well, does your clarinet playing help or influence your conducting, and does your conducting or newer found conducting career help or influence your clarinet playing, or are they just you're expanding your horizons and they're not necessarily connected?
Yeah, let's get this right. I think everything I've done for the last 25 years has been about education. Every project, everything, conducting, playing, and I think it's a good approach because I think I know that it's really honest when I say when I started to conduct, I got so many lessons, not only from conductors or when I talk to conductors, because that was my plan when I tried. Okay, I will try to conduct a bit, and then I took some lessons for the people that I met, which was, fantastic conductors, and but I think the whole process and the whole journey for me has been so much about education. If I answer your question right now, absolutely. You start to conduct, your ears get bigger, you get out of your ego, and in a good way, I would say. I mean, you still see grown up adult soloists that you see on them that they are so focused on themselves and that.
But I've never come across a conductor with a big ego. So anyway, I've learned something. I'm just kidding.
No, but I'm saying I don't say that conductors has no big ego. I think the process of a player who are suddenly have to take care of an orchestra while playing. That was my point. So if you play a Mozart concerto, and just try a very simple example, you play the clarinet concerto quite often. You do it with conductors, which is great, and then suddenly you do it without conductors, and then you are forced to know what if you are in tune with the bassoon, or if they are together with the first one, whatever, or the phrase if they join you, or so it's a different or more tricky pieces like doing the Nielsen without conductor and doing the Copeland without conductor. Then you are forced to do things that has to do with education, because you have to step up on these stairs and you have to really to use your ear in a more sensitive thing, and also when you demand things from the orchestra, which I do a lot. I mean, you have to listen to this and this, and that we don't hear them over there. Oh, I'm sure you hear them. It's just that you have to adjust to the very, very far distance and do it. And I think they actually appreciate that's the answer, because in the pandemic time we sit even, in America you are of course extreme with this distance. I see that you're sitting like 5 meters in between, or?
Well, I'm in Hong Kong right now.
Sorry, you're in Hong Kong, but in New York I saw, and in Los Angeles I saw that it was.
Oh, you mean orchestra? You mean concerts?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and we are also. Well, we're doing.
It's a bit more closer, but it's anyway difficult to hear. And I think the whole education of this is, but I really mean when I said get away from your ego, because when you try to help and listen in another way when you perform, I think it's a beautiful thing. And when, of course, if you get into the really conducting thing, of course, then it has to do with power and to have control and so on. So that's a different story, maybe.
I just actually want to share, having now done some of these things with shields and distance and so forth. It's a very different experience, but in a way, it also, and the sound at first is different and everything's different, but in a way, it also forces you to listen in a different way to come up with the same or similar, hopefully, product. To perform. So it's actually an interesting exercise, if you will, doing that kind of stuff. And we had a third wave. We started to get on stage. We did a couple of them. We had a third wave, and we're going to get on again in 2 or 3 weeks, probably with a lot of Beethoven. So, which is, of course, very sensitive to this sort of thing. So it'll be very curious to see how that all works out.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also different, of course. I can imagine for, let's say in your case, I mean, of course, it's different for winds, but think of a violin player who sits then quite alone. First of all, they hear themselves very clearly, and then they have to play together with 15 others, and it's as you say, it's a great education, and I think it could just help for the future when you get together again.
Yeah, fantastic. Martin, I mean, I've gone through my questions and you beat me to all of them. You know, we just went we did some good chamber music today between the two of us.
Wow.
I had some questions and you went there. I mean, basically, I like very much your answer. I mean, the Juilliard question and your response to that. And I just want to recap. Enjoy more and create more, because this is how I always end my interviews. Last chance to just add something to that, some advice to young people. Let's say this, COVID is a little bit different. You said yourself, things are moving in a little different direction. The future, immediate future of classical music is a little bit vulnerable maybe right now, a little bit fragile. Do you have any words of inspiration or any advice on how to get through this period for the next, it could be few years or months, I mean, I don't know, but and any thoughts on that? Any last thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's so much, it's so different in different countries, and I mean, in Sweden we have problem with the culture life. I would say needs to have higher status, because we are still we have 50 people in the audience, but the restaurants are full, so it's very strange. It's not very logic, and
Right.
yeah, but you mean an advice for freelance younger students or this kind of?
I'm going to let it be much broader than that. Just young musicians. I mean, already you said enjoy more, create more. Very important advice. Anything more about just generally that you want to add to that? Let's keep it that simple.
Yeah, I think that the whole thing that had happened during the pandemic, but when people get tired, of course, and I see that when I talk to my English friends, that I mean, they want to escape the country or whatever, they're going back now to 6 people. And of course, it's hard for us all. And I think we are lucky. I think myself, we are lucky to have the music, and we are lucky to have play an instrument. And when we then are able to create together, that longing and that passion will, of course, be rewarded. We will come back to that place where we can start to make music again. It's just enormous patience, but again, I think enjoy the moments. And I have been inside many months, and I have always found moments with joyful music making, and it's. Especially in the beginning, you are alone with your instrument. It's very specific that the relationship could change, because you're just standing there with your clarinet, and this is you and me now, and this is it for a while. that could be quite, yeah, challenging, but also in a nice way. So enjoy that moment as well.
Fantastic. We're going to mention your foundation one more time with a banner. This is where you can contribute. And if you want to participate, again, thank you to Buffet Crampon for live streaming and helping to support this terrific foundation. Thank you to Herman Stephenson, our dear mutual friend who really put us in touch for this and gave me a lot of background and is an important person in terms of this foundation. Martin, thank you so much. There was an okay, listen, we've had one person get on here multiple times, not just on this interview. One last question. What ligature do you use?
That was the question I didn't want to talk about.
Okay, I know. We don't use
well, I'm
we have a suicidal person here. I mean,
No. I will tell. The thing is, as I said, I'm so, of course, I play Buffet Crampon, I play Van Doren mouthpiece, but now I got a bit unsure about my ligature. But it's the same as I had. Actually, Van Doren made one for me, a fantastic one. But at the moment, I can't use it because it was something, I will get a new one. But that's a great one. I'm not sure if they sell it. Otherwise, maybe I should quit my clarinet. Otherwise, you can't get out of this.
Okay.
Help me. What is the name of the big, the other one with the big screw like this? Oh, you should.
I think we did. I think
we will write to him. We will write to him or her.
After an hour and a half, we finally got to the profound stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure you wanted to talk more about it. But as I said, I'm maybe not the perfect guy to talk about ligatures, but I really think it's important as the barrel, the clarinets and the mouthpieces and the reeds. I think everything is important, but just a bit different from different person, what they prefer.
There you go. Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. This is 19 weeks. We were just according to what you were saying, Martin, we did this on a whim, literally on 2 or 3 days notice. We didn't plan it, and we haven't missed a single week. What do you think of that? Just we did it. We said, how do you like it? Yeah, let's do it again. We'd invite someone a few days notice. How do you like it? Yeah, let's do it again. We haven't missed a single week in 5 months. So anyway, we're doing our best. You're doing your best. Keep on doing what you're doing. And we've gotten so many positive comments about appreciation for everything you've been doing for the last few decades for society and music and clarinet and everything else. So please don't.
We sound so old, but that's true. Yeah.
Please don't stop. One last question. How was the cookie?
That was fantastic. I will go out now and see how it goes. But the first one was fantastic, which I really enjoyed.
Okay, great.
In the camera, but yeah.
Thanks for nothing. Okay, man. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you join us next week.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye-bye.